Hello and welcome to the East and Kicks podcast, a regular magazine programme about East Asian film led by me, Andrew Heskins, founder and grandmaster of eastkicks.com, and James Mudge, our leading writer.
Hey-o.
Each episode we'll be taking a look at the latest films, news and festivals, often chatting to filmmakers and stars along the way. Welcome to the latest show. This episode we're focusing on an exploitation classic, Calamity of Snakes, being released in a newly restored version by Unearthed Films. But before we get on to that, let's start off with that important question. What are you drinking this episode, James?
Something very classy, actually. I've got a 12-year-old Bowmore single malt, which is actually...
Ooh, very nice.
It's definitely one of my favourite ones, actually, from Ely. So it's very nice one.
Peaty, right?
It's not too... This one's more smoky. I would say the peaty, it's not quite as complicated a flavour. Some of the other... I don't think this one... Put it this way, I mean, it's a great one, but I think it's one of the ones which is possibly slightly easier to drink. If you're not, you're not expecting hardcore flavour. So it's smoky, but it's not like
peaty can get too peaty very quickly, I think.
Yeah. Some of those flavours are the ones which would turn off the...
Max you out.
Yeah, if you just jump in not expecting it, then...
I remember my wife was very into the whole peaty side, and basically I went to a specialist whiskey shop close to... kind of Baker Street area, and he basically said, "You have to get her to tone it down because she's gone up to the max. She's gone up to 11. She has to dial it back a bit. Otherwise, you won't enjoy it. Otherwise, you can't go any further." So. Yeah,
that's true. But once you've got it, you can't really. There's not really anywhere else to go if you get to that. Whereas if you start, because I enjoy like a wide range of whiskies from the good to the terrible as well. But if you go down to the full. The most rich flavours you can get, then everything else is going to be... your palate will be changed.
And so I am on the old Crafty Hen. Mm-hmm. At 6.5.
That's always a classic. Yeah, it's always a classic. Another easy drinking despite its strength.
Yeah, well, that's the danger, isn't it?
In my old beer days, I had quite a lot of the Crafty Hen. I think that was one of my favourite of the genre.
Yeah, so cheers.
Here's to it. Oh, that's nice.
And on with Calamity of Snakes, coming to US Blu-ray and DVD from the 25th of April via Unearthed Films. Should we kind of start with this release? Because it's kind of a bit of kind of background, and it's interesting to see some of this exploitation stuff really start to get out there now after.
Definitely. I mean, some of these films as well. I think it's not. Exaggeration to call it like a pretty obscure, hard to get one, but which people might have heard of, or if you're a proper hardcore exploitation fan, or if you're into that quite specific period, I think of the early 80s, late 70s, when Hong Kong cinema was kind of going through a very weird patch, and transitioning towards through the new wave into what we saw in the 80s in Hong Kong cinema, and we were getting all kinds of crazy stuff from the Shaw Brothers and then sort of knock-on effect was having a lot of independent producers making even crazier films like this one, and so many of them were lost to time, came out on VCDs and probably never came out again after that. So actually having been able to find materials for this one and remaster it into 2K is pretty it's both very impressive that it was done, and it's also an interesting choice that it was actually done, because a lot of the time when we think of extreme cinema or extreme exploitation, where this film goes with the snakes and the animal cruelty side of it kind of marks it out as being something very different.
And I guess that's one side of it we can probably kind of mention that up front, isn't it? That because of that, Unearthed Films are giving to a snake charity.
Save the Snakes, I believe that's what it said. So, which is, admirable.
I'm not sure if it makes up. I mean, and then we'll get into the plot later, but it's kind of ironic the amount of damage that's done to snakes during this film, or at least I mean, and it's not just appears to be. I mean, there's no way.
It's real.
This is special effects.
No.
We're not got the creatures as we'd see in an old Fulci zombie film where you've got the terrible kind of like plastic bats and terrible snakes and stuff, terrible spiders rather in those. This is real. This is real, yeah. But yeah, I mean, kind of talking about, I'm kind of start with the kind of the versions of this. So I think one thing, and I'm not sure from the press release we've seen and the screener that that's been shared with us is, which version of the film this is. Mm-hmm. But in a very real sense, I think you can also say that there is no such thing as a definitive version of this film because it was available in so many different formats, and a lot of these films. There was a kind of almost not quite an ad hoc nature to how they were edited and released, but there's so many kind of different iterations of it that saying that this is the.
Oh yeah, definitely, and also it would have been, based on the materials that were available for actually remastering, because you can't really put together, a film and have a few minutes here or there which are not remastered because you didn't get the original source materials. But I mean, the version I'd originally seen. Way before seeing this one was definitely the crappy US release, which was by Brentwood, or Brentwood put it out, which probably just means there was no copyright on it, and they were putting out so many of these like weird little DVD packs of awful quality stuff, which could have come from a VHS or VCD
before, haven't we?
They've definitely, definitely come up before. So that was the first one I saw, and. That was on, full disclosure, I saw that one on YouTube because, again, there would be no copyright on it, so it probably wasn't exactly a crime to upload that old version. But it was, it was knackered, it was terrible quality. But there were a couple of versions even originally. There was a theatrical version, there was an export version, but even those weren't very different in terms of their lengths. And it was just a few things like flashes of nudity and things like that.
And from what I've seen, this feels like it's the theatrical version rather than the international export cut. Because there's an absolutely hilarious Austin Powers style placement of some things. There's a little tete-a-tete in a hotel room while it's still and we'll get on to the whole plot, but while things are still under construction. And it's definitely everything's very, very carefully placed, which is.
Yeah, and I can't say, I as you say, and I can't say what is exactly the definitive version. So I mean, it's
and also the process of restoration as well, as we had BG Cheng on the show. But a lot of it is, sometimes there are alternative shots because that's what's available. And you're kind of. And again, that's part of the problem here. You're trying to piece together what the film should be like. Sometimes the director's involved. Sometimes, in this case, the director couldn't be involved. So it is almost a subjective thing in terms of what's being created, and what version is. It is.
Yeah, and in this case, just trying to get as much of the exploitation content in there, and just going by referencing this version versus the older one I saw, this certainly has. There's nothing missing from that in terms of either the gore, the snake slaughter, the brief bits of sex and nudity. There's nothing I think that's missing from that, and because they were not very different, as I say, in actual terms of length. Some of that could have just been mistaken running times as well. So which is another level of confusion. Actually, to it, and there was a lot more footage for this film shot, which was put into that Serpent Warriors US film, which I've never managed to see with Eartha Kitt and Clint Walker.
Fantastic.
I would like to see it definitely, but so there is other material which was not in these versions. So it's a very confusing situation and stuff. So actually pulling this together, like you say, it's both like the remaster and also kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, putting everything back together and fixing up. So It's just funny, like seeing a film like this looking good, or is looking as good as it actually can, because just so used to having seen these films either earlier in my film watching career, having seen them on crappy VHS or pirate videos or VCDs, or stuff I'd seen,
or even official, those. Official
true.
Brentwood DVDs were not good condition.
No.
Often they would be little more than a VHS rip.
Oh, definitely, and even stuff we see in the now, which is on YouTube for really obscure stuff. When you're trying to find it, a lot of the time that's just people uploading like these bad quality Brentwood ones or VCDs and stuff. So when you actually see a film like this, like Calamity of Snakes, actually looking good and sounding good, it's quite it's quite shocking. I mean, I love the fact that people like Unearthed would actually go to the trouble of going through a film like this and actually bringing it up to snuff, so to speak. It's still slightly blows my mind, though. Just that these kind of films actually get that kind of treatment, because, especially frankly, like insane schlocker like this one.
And we'll get onto the insanity shortly, but so we go into a bit of the background of this film. So I mean, you talk about it being a Hong Kong film, but it is very much from the era of that very porous Hong Kong Taiwan co-production. Which does it actually count as? And the answer is none of them, all of them.
Exactly. Exactly. It's really confusing. Not so much just for this film, but any film when you're researching or trying to track stuff down as to whether they're a Hong Kong film technically or a Taiwan film technically, and where they were completely shot, whether they were all shot in Hong Kong or Taiwan or no. Very, very much in that back and forth Hong Kong Taiwan period for sure, of the early 80s. Yeah.
And do we know much about the actual producers of this, or the director, or
not massively, to be honest with you. And I did try researching this film before for the because I in being interviewed in the documentary, which is one of the extras on the release.
Full disclosure time.
Full disclosure time, but also full disclosure, I couldn't really find much information at all about the film, which is, I guess, adds to its mystique. But I don't really know a huge amount about the actual production. I mean, it was directed by William Chung. He did the Bruce Lee knockoff Story of the Dragon, and he produced The New Mr. Vampire, but not, at least by what we can read in English currently on places like HKMDB, not a huge list of familiar credits or anything like that. So not really. I don't really know too much about the actual production side of it, but it would be interesting, probably disturbing to know about how they actually went about making it. Some of the scenes. And
what stars do we have in here? It's not a particularly well-known cast, is it?
No. Unsurprisingly, and again, look through them, and we've got people whose names I'm not so familiar with, like Hyung Wan Pang, Li Ying, Lo Pi Ling was in quite a few things, quite a long list of films, but only in tiny sort of bit parts and everything. And probably the only one I kind of recognised more was Cao Yan, who plays the boss guy in the film. He was in quite a few Shaw Brothers films, like Brothers 5, and some martial arts stuff in the 70s, like Angry River. And apparently, he was the first Hong Kong actor to be in a film which achieved a box office revenue of above 1 million HK dollars, the Golden Eagle, which got me a reputation as the millionaire leading actor. But I'm not vouching for the accuracy of all of that, because it comes from this comes from kind of translated text, which is also the other issue with researching some of this stuff, especially when you get. If you're researching some of these films and some of these actors, they have really long lists of 5 to 10 different names they have, which they went by in Hong Kong, which they went by in Taiwan, sometimes using pseudonyms for acting when they were acting in less respectable type of films like this and stuff. So, and
sometimes it's just the alternative spellings as well.
It is,
minefield.
Absolutely.
And I'm never. I mean, one of the person I recognised most in the cast was Nyai Ping Niao. And also known as Wei Ping O, who does a lot of the comedy. So he's another kind of bit player, really, but had been doing very similar roles. He's got a very similar role, really, in Fist of Fury, and he's in Aikido and stuff like that. He's obviously the sort of annoying, grovelling kind of second in command of somebody who's a bit dodgy type thing, and he does much the same here. But he's got most of the very broad comedy that we get throughout the.
Yeah, there is some really broad comedy. I think basically it's a cast made up of sort of bit part actors, some character actors, and everything. That there's not really any big name stars, but it's not like you really need them for a film like this. I don't think that's why people would have been coming to watch it. Either now or back then. I mean, people are here for better or worse, are there for the snakes.
So let's talk about the plot. Yeah, come on. Let's sum up the plot as bizarre as it is.
I'll give it a very short, because it's both bizarre and senseless, but also you could summarize it very, very easily, as we'll get to when we talk about the craziness of it. But yeah, I mean, it's basically set in Taiwan, and we have this kind of familiar setup where a new fancy apartment building is going up, and it's delayed because they find this massive pit of snakes in the foundations, which in itself is, I don't know if that's the thing snakes do, but it's a big pit just swarming with snakes, and the boss, the guy we've mentioned there, Cao Yuan, just is like, no, it's fine. We're just gonna. He takes matters into his own hands with a forklift truck, and just smashes and pulps up the snakes, even though the architect. And the others protest and stuff. So
and his wife as well. I mean, it starts with having this kind of vision of this doom that's going to come.
The great doom of snakes.
Let's kill them all. We can't wait for the fire brigade. We can't waste time.
Right. The project can't be stopped. Time is money. Let's kill them.
But he just goes through and pulps all the snakes, and then they go ahead with the construction. But then surprisingly, snakes keep turning up on the site like a. It's a vicious boa constrictor, and we get a scene we'll mention later where the boss brings in this martial arts snakes expert and mongoose to help him with all these snakes and stuff, and eventually the building gets finished, and of course in the great tradition, like the grand opening is interrupted by the appearance of a huge number of snakes, which just run amok and attacking all the guests and all the residents as if they actually plan. The snakes actually have a plan, almost. It's not quite clear if they're revenge snakes, karma snakes, or just snakes that happen to be there, and that's what happens. So yeah.
I think we both came up with sort of same kind of one-line description, which it is a cross between your sort of creature feature like Jaws or Piranha meets a not so towering inferno.
Yeah, exactly. It's towering inferno if you had snakes instead of fire.
And also, bizarrely, if you have at least one floor missing, which seems to be...
That's true.
When watching it back, it's 1, 2, 3, 5. Like, where's the fourth floor? That's where they cut costs. They had to cut costs to get it up. And just like, went forward.
It is interesting. I've honestly no idea if there's a reason for that. Because you couldn't... It's, without getting into that whole Spinal Tap conversation about they're going up to 11, there's no fourth floor. 1, 2, 3, 4... No idea.
You do get the whole 13th floor.
Yeah, 13th floor.
Western because of superstition, but in Asian,
I've never heard of 4.
Four's not a.
Not that I've ever heard or encountered. But maybe there's a reason, or maybe it's a fake sign and somebody just forgot to put a 4 on it.
Somehow that feels quite likely.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's the case. But no, it's a really bizarre plot because so much of it is just set pieces or excuses for the snakes to attack, and not even good excuses. Most of the time it's just snake set piece after snake set piece, right? But that's
I mean the setups are just cray and
yeah, they are.
As you said, they make absolutely no sense. But somebody's in a car and in a bath, or the whole disco.
The disco, It's just, it's kind of what you want, though, to an extent. And I mean, that's one of the things I like about the film is just how it doesn't make a lick of sense, but it doesn't really pretend to either. Sometimes these kind of films can either just become too confusing, which I don't think this is because there's nothing to follow, or they just waste time. Like in the way like some like kaiju films or Godzilla films make the mistake of thinking we really want to spend time learning about the human characters instead of just seeing the carnage and things happen. Whereas this doesn't even really bother with that.
No, but it does have some very weird. It does have some very kind of long sequences. So you see the sort of the snake expert kind of going through, chopping up a snake at a market, and, and kind of taking out all the important bits for different various.
Oh yeah, I
reasons.
mean, sure, but they're still not. I mean, if that's what it's still technically filed under snake carnage. That stuff.
Well, yeah, and then the very long mongoose sequence. I was that just seemed to go on forever while the mongooses are battling the snakes, and then there's two of them.
That's a bizarre. I mean, what?
It's so weird. I wasn't expecting that.
No,
I mean, I think so. The crazy, when you get to the crazy kung fu battle, that's one thing. That's so. I mean, that is coming out of the Shaw Brothers kind of approach to the sort of black magic and all those kind of films, but also you see it in the hopping vampire things that you're starting to see with spooky encounters. Yes, let's get a martial artist to sort out any problem. That's what you need. Exterminations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Rat exterminations, snake exterminations, and kung fu fighting.
No, the mongoose scene is. I know what you mean. They're a different kind of madness. Just taking that scene and the absolutely insane, battle with the big snake, the kung fu fight, which almost does seem like the snake is fighting him with some kind of kung fu, or at least some kind of.
It's a very nimble python, isn't it? Just flying around like nobody's business.
It knows what it's doing as well. There's kind of a will to it. It's not just like an animal attacking him. It actually is engaged in combat with him. But so that scene versus the mongoose scene, they're very different kinds of insanity. Especially the mongoose scene having a nice bit of pop soundtrack to it as well. So it's just even just putting those two scenes. Thinking about them back to back, that just sums up how bizarre this film is and how much it just jumps around.
Kind of get into some of the context on it. Even outside of Hong Kong and Taiwan, there is this, these kind of bizarre scenes you get, and we can come on to sort of the actual, real animal cruelty in films.
Yeah.
But when you've got things like Cannibal Holocaust coming through, where there's a lot of kind of weird scenes like that where they are putting stuff in that's really. It's not about the plot. It is that sort of exploitation. Yeah,
like Mondo style footage, which quite again without knowing too much about the production history of the film, some of that stuff might well have been documentary footage bought from somewhere. That wouldn't surprise me too much, and it was spliced in there. I'm not saying it is, but absolutely for quite a lot of those films, this kind of exploitation, some stuff would just be put in there and. Whether or not they actually filmed it's another question.
And then we got the bizarre, as we say, very Benny Hill, very Merle Turtle kind of humour going on. Yeah. I mean, we even get a gag about the classic gag about a snake being confused for somebody having an erection. It's all very, very.
Pretty much everything you can think of is thrown in there. Lowbrow humour, toilet humour, sexist humour. It's all. It's all in there, and some of it's kind of funny, but it's in this weird way where it's. Large stretches of the film, you're just not sure what's supposed to be funny or not funny because it's incredibly chaotic the way it's directed. I mean, in a very, very entertaining way. It's a lot of fun.
It is. I mean, in a very kind of linear way, it's quite coherent despite the kind of the craziness of some of the choices.
Just because there's nothing to
go on.
Yeah, it just goes between set pieces, and we know the snakes are going to turn up at the end in the building. So before that, it's just advancing the plot through some snake attacks, and it's that good kind of chaos. It's as you say, like it somehow walks that line between being utterly senseless but still fairly coherent. It's easy. You don't feel annoyed, but sometimes you watch a film and they get almost to the point of being obtuse or obscure because they're so badly put together. Whereas this one, because it just is set pieces, it doesn't really have that. Doesn't really kind of have that kind of problem. And the direction is fine as well. I mean, the direction is classic exploitation stuff as well. Like, lots of mad zooms all the way through it, close-ups of faces and sweating people and everything. So,
and it's, I mean, and in terms of how it's done, and it is a sort of background of into the 70s and into the 80s, we had a lot of these sort of creature features. We had the Swarm, we had that Kingdom of the Spiders with Joan Connors, and we had Piranha, we had Jaws. There was a lot of this stuff going on at that point. You also have things like Centipede Horror and all this stuff that's. But it actually does. At certain points, it does do this kind of this tension quite well of the snakes are coming in the room. There's more and more of them, and they're just kind of
no, absolutely.
Yeah, but kind of I mean, a lot of them are being thrown in. You can just see the hands doing it.
They're really being thrown in. Most of these poor.
But there's the lady there sitting around, doing her knitting. Never has knitting been quite so tense as when she's in there, just absolutely oblivious.
And this is definitely on the other film which it reminded me a bit about was Squirm, just in terms of what's his name, Jeff Lieberman's Squirm, where it's just. Again, it just set pieces about worms over and over again, where to the point where, at the end, like the house is just filled with real worms mixed up with spaghetti and stuff, and it's completely senseless. But it gets a lot of mileage out of just increasingly outlandish set pieces involving the attacking creatures. So it is. I mean, absolutely, it takes that formula for like the disaster film / nature run amok, and then just. I don't know, just turns everything up to 11 to get back to the Spinal Tap thing, and just throws absolutely everything possible in there. Okay, we'll get a bit of sleaze in there. We'll get some lowbrow humor in there. We'll get a martial arts battle in there. I mean, there was no need for a martial arts battle with the boa constrictor, but thank God they threw it in there.
I mean, and that is very much the exploitation spirit of throwing everything against the wall.
Yeah,
and then seeing what sticks.
Not even caring what sticks.
Not even really caring what sticks.
Just throwing more stuff in straight away afterwards. But it keeps it all moving along really, really quickly, and it's whatever the version is. I mean, it's a sub 90-minute film, which is great. So that it's very, very entertaining. In these terms, before we get to talk about the bad side of the film. But it's one of the proper. Hardcore, just insane, demented exploitation films in so many ways, in terms of what they were, trying to give audiences, I guess, what they thought audiences wanted to see, and then just cranking everything up again. Yeah,
I mean, I regular listeners will probably know this, but I do often get distracted by the music that's mildly appropriated. So I mean, and it's some really corking tracks. There's several tracks from Maniac.
Oh, really?
The soundtrack from 1980,
nice. Okay.
From 1980 by Jay Chataway. I was 3 or 4 tracks. One of them used as the main theme.
I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
We've got this bizarre bit at one of the parties where they've got that disco classic, the Hooked On classics. Playing in the background, which is all kind of perky classical disco beat music. Another track by French pop disco electronic band Space called Symphony on there. So really kind of always kind of weird stuff of
but somebody made an effort to actually pull all those tracks actually in there, so it's
and it actually like a lot of these films actually this appropriated, shall we say, or Nick's music, particularly the Jay Chataway stuff from Maniac works really, really well. It's a great soundtrack anyway, so that does work well.
Yeah, definitely. That's doesn't surprise me that there's some thievery going on, put it that way, but
I mean, another thing I like today is actually the title of this, Calamity It's always it's such a hilarious kind of type, to say it's a calamity.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's got that sort of slight weird grammar thing to it as well. It doesn't quite make sense. Calamity of Snakes. It's a calamity for the snakes, but calling it, I don't know, but I agree.
The original, I mean, and this is only done on Google, so they're not going to go with accuracy, but the original title is perhaps a little more appropriate. Seems to roughly translate as Human Snake War. Oh,
well, that's better. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes it sound like a slightly different kind of film, but it's definitely more. It is definitely more accurate, or it's certainly in terms of the fact that the snakes actually do seem to be consciously fighting back against the humans. That they're not just there. They actually do. They do seem to have a plan or something, which is just one of life's many imponderables, I guess.
And it's different from, I mean, the other the film to kind of bring up, of course, is the much earlier exploitation classic, The Killer Snakes.
Yes, yeah.
But those are snakes that are under someone's control versus these ones that are under
that's
carrying their own vengeance on.
Yeah, The Killer Snakes is kind of an earlier like Gong Tao black magic film where they're being used, and there's lizards in the film and stuff as well. So, it's definitely different kind of. I mean, there's never any even hint of an explanation apart from the fact that snakes might be angry. In this film, they finally had enough and they're not taking it anymore. Although they would make an interesting double bill just in the fact that Killer Snakes is so much more nihilistic and depressing a film, whereas this is kind of like cheerful insanity. If that's the right way to put it. Whereas Killer Snakes is actually a really grim film. Thematic, whereas this one, is much more grim in terms of the snake slaughter, but it's cheerful, I guess, in a way.
Partly because of perky music, but for most.
Well, you're right. Yeah, the soundtrack does keep things bobbing along, whereas the Killer Snakes has just got a lot of lurid lighting, and I can't remember the soundtrack. I wouldn't be surprised if it was stolen from somewhere as well.
Yeah, I mean, there always were. Yeah. Actually, we kind of dwell a bit more on the sort of the bad side of the film.
You can't get away from it.
It's got to be said. It is. There is a lot happening to these poor snakes.
There is. There really is.
Apart from the python, who is definitely a prop for at least half of that time.
Yeah, I think we can.
When he's flying around,
I don't think anyone's thrown a python. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's tough to. It is tough to watch, and it's just. It's the sheer almost like factory line almost of snake slaughter. It does. Like I said before, it does almost feel ironic. That these snakes in the film, these snakes have, they've got a beef and they want to get their revenge, and yet you think about all the poor snakes in this film. Yeah.
Where's their revenge?
No, it's true, and as you said before, it is kind of a mix. We've got some Mondo footage type stuff, like snake bladders being removed, and the sort of snakes down the market, or the so-called medicinal or restaurant side of it, and then we've just got like the sort of wholesale ones of like lots of snakes being hacked up, burned, slow motion snake slaughter, and. And it is obvious that they wouldn't have had the budget to do this anyway. But these are live animals that this is happening to, and that's gross. I think at certain points, back in the old days, people might have gone, "Oh well, they're snakes," I think, but
this is not
this film. I think just because there's so much of it. I mean, in other films and stuff, and there's animal slaughter. Unfortunately, has a long and kind of continuing tradition, but just it's jaw-dropping the sheer amount of snakes which are actually killed in this film. It's insane how many of them there are, and even the ones which survived the filming, I'm gonna doubt they actually were rounded up safely and released into the wild where they lived out their lives happily.
I actually remember 20 years ago I was in that great film.
Oh man, there's hundreds, or if not thousands, of them getting slaughtered in this film. Even just the way it opens with him mashing them up with that truck, it's genuinely quite jaw-dropping. Even watching it again, in this new version, like seeing that scene, it's just wow, Jesus Christ. So,
and that's one thing that in some ways that's not massively helped by a new restoration where you can clearly see what's going on.
Yeah, true.
Grubby old VHS copy wouldn't have you just wouldn't have seen that detail. And
that's true.
Thought that they were.
Yeah, that's true. You could have kidded yourself on a bit. So, and that's we've. I stand by all the things we've said about it being really fun and entertaining in so many ways, but it's such a... This is going to be... There's just no point in people watching this film if that's going to trigger people, the snake cruelty, because it's not even vaguely... there's nothing even vaguely like justifiable or okay about it in that sense. And it makes it a tough one, because we are talking about saying, this is an entertaining film, there's so many like fun, wacky, crazy things about it and stuff, but on the other hand, you can't get around... You can't really get around this side of the film, because it's the film's reason for existence. It's not a film which just happened to have a bit of this in it. I mean, this is the film. Snake slaughter, turn up and see hundreds or thousands of snakes being killed. So it's a tough one in that respect, because it's a film I've seen it a few times now. I do. I've said I find it entertaining and stuff, but it's never a film I'd recommend to anyone. I don't think it's not even like a funny one. You come back with your friends late at night drunk and you put on Serbian film just to shock people or to have a laugh and tell them, put on Faces of Death in the old days and tell people it's real. Whereas this is, I wouldn't do that with this film. I think a lot of people would quite understandably have very, very triggered reactions to it. As you say, it's just...
I'm not unreasonably.
No, not unreasonably either, because it is just real and it's there. And, we don't really know about the production history of the film, but I'm guessing they wouldn't have come out and said, don't worry, we ate all these snakes afterwards. Because, both the fact that they're killed in cruel fashion. It's not... There's not, like... They weren't shooting these snakes up with snake drugs and then not knowing what happened to them. They're properly slaughtered, but... I can't imagine there was, anything afterwards which happened to them apart from them being shoveled up and thrown away, because so many of them are actually just pulped.
Yeah,
They don't even seem to be saving the medicinal parts or anything like that. So you can't really get away from that side of the film for people, and it has to come with that kind of warning.
Yeah.
For people, but I don't think it's a film people would watch by accident.
No.
To that extent, it's not. I mean, it's pretty niche in that respect, and even if you came across it by accident, it's very clear that's what it is. And with them, they've got their cruelty-free cut on there, which on the extras, which I haven't seen. I can't really imagine what's in that. I imagine it's pretty short. But that option's there, and they've got their snake charity donations. So there's. They're taking the, some applaudable actions in that respect, and it's not. I don't feel this film is like, in this day and age, especially, it's not promoting doing this. No one's going to copy this film and think this is a great idea. So it's not glamorizing them. It's almost like a bizarre historical artifact, to an extent. There's nothing in this which is. People are not really gleeful about the snake slaughter in the film. It's not like this is a great thing in the film. It's just pure exploitation, that it's happening. It's never been... It wasn't really ever copied since in any kind of way which I've seen and stuff. So I think it in terms of where it sits today, it is like a kind of curiosity piece, for like hardcore exploitation fans. But even then, like I think even like a lot of people who would enjoy something like Serbian film or some of the other stuff. Unearthed Films do put out like a really great catalogue of really hardcore and extreme stuff. Really extreme stuff. But it is like animal slaughter which upsets people more.
Yeah.
There's a scene stuff like...
Rightly so.
Yeah, for sure. Because it does, hit home and doesn't have special effects, and it's, so unnecessary and, cruel. But even in films like Necromantic and things like that, when there's things seems like a rabbit getting killed, that's what I remember more in Necromantic and some of the other stuff. So I think that's how I'd categorize it as being, sort of a curiosity piece, historical, and it's not gonna have inspired anyone to do anything the same, and it's not gonna attract people who aren't curious to see it. I don't think too many people would actually come to this thinking it's great to see lots of snakes being slaughtered in that respect. I think people would come to it more just because of the overall madness of it. I don't think anyone's saying, what I've been missing in my life is seeing snakes getting slaughtered, because I'm sure you can find on YouTube or some nature shows, because they still get eaten for food, snakes. So there's probably So there's probably stuff out there on that. If that's
I've eaten snake.
I've had snake before. I didn't
in China and in Moab as well, in the States. So
so it's
but the one in China wasn't massively humanely killed, because we killed the guy with a pair of scissors. But that's we wouldn't hope that they were humanely killed. There's nothing wrong with the snakes being eaten as a food source.
No. I know what you mean. So it does occupy an odd space in that respect. So we've there is a long history of animal cruelty in cinema, not just in Asia, but in general and stuff. And it's stuff we still see. Even like fairly recently, we still see stuff. It's an ongoing issue in mainland China, especially with horses and other animals.
It's always been a.
There's no. There are a lot of sort of from the people rather than the government, like animal rights activist groups, but even in Korea they still get a lot, like even stuff like Good, the Bad, the Weird was censored internationally for animal cruelty. Of course, we have Old Boy with him eating a live octopus. Again, he eats it, but does that make it massively okay? I don't know. It's a very tough one.
You've got to watch out as you're eating an octopus, because they can get their revenge and their dying things, and then kind of strangle you from the inside.
I had live squid in Korea, and I would never do that again. It was just like chewing on seawater in a weird. It was moving all the time, but there was no. I didn't even get like a taste sensation from it. It was just every time you chewed into it and it was fighting you, it was just like squirting seawater into your mouth. No, never again. It just gives me the boke to think about it. But there's a long history of stuff, and there's always a weird line, and something like Calamity of Snakes, because it's so much of it in there. But even when we break it down to some of the like beloved films for people, like Spooky Encounters and other films of the period which had like real chicken sacrifice rituals in them, where a chicken was actually killed on screen, sometimes censored in the UK releases, sometimes not. So it's always one of those kind of slightly weird things, whether you accept it or all of it or none of it. It's either, I think, never a good thing, or or it's just something people kind of accept as happened or happened. So I think would be easy to condemn something like Calamity of Snakes, but I think if you have to look at the sort of wider picture of so many of these films. We're not going to go into a huge list of all this stuff here, but it is incredibly common. Especially in Asian cinema. Not so much now, but certainly in like the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, incredibly common. So it's if you're condemning Calamity of Snakes, and I think some other films should probably be looked at or highlighted. And when I was going through and researching some of this, there's quite a lot of ones I'd actually forgotten, and I'm not sure if they were cut for international release. So again, maybe we're not seeing stuff, but that doesn't mean the animals didn't die. I don't know. It is a very, very tough question, and I think it comes down to, as we said, it's completely understandable if some people are, be too appalled to watch it. It's fully understandable, and also the fact that I think because of the nature of this film, it's not glamorizing or glorifying it. It's just pure cynical exploitation in that respect, which doesn't make it a good thing. So I don't know. It's a tough one though.
So Calamity of Snakes is released by Unearthed Films on Blu-ray and DVD from the 25th of April. That's it for now. Don't forget you can find all of our previous episodes on Apple, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and you'll never miss an episode. But for now, cheers.
Here's to the snakes.
Oh.